What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and this video should be going live the day Final Fantasy XVI has been unleashed on the public. And with fans worldwide likely celebrating the momentous release of one of this year's most anticipated games, there's always somebody out there looking to be offended by something. To catch you up to speed, back in November 2022, a bunch of terminally online losers took issue that Square Enix's newest Final Fantasy game was remarkably white, and of course, like any typical social justice warrior response, these morons cried racism and demanded reparations from Square Enix. Naoki Yoshida, the game's producer, responded to this backlash by essentially telling these idiots that their claims were unfounded. Yoshida said they created 16's world to reflect an isolated nation cut off from the rest of the world, and that the game's diversity is a direct reflection of this choice. Valisthea, which is where 16 takes place, is based on medieval Europe. And I know for people in the Western world, a medieval setting might not seem all that special. But you need to remember that 16 is made by Japanese devs, and for their culture, medieval Europe is about as foreign to them as deodorant is to some anime fans. Yoshida also said that the team worked hard to make sure 16's cast of characters were defined by more than just their skin color, and that their actions matter far more than their ethnicity or what's between their legs. Yoshida finished by assuring fans that 16's world will have lots of secrets and twists, and that diversity as a concept can vary wildly based on everyone's personal viewpoint, which yeah, he's right. Unfortunately, nuance and understanding opinions that don't align perfectly with your own seems to be a lost art in today's world. With this article that inspired this video titled, "Here's Why Some Players Plan to Boycott Final Fantasy XVI." Over half a year later and a marketing demo released for free to advertise the game, and people are still pissed that 16 doesn't have as much diversity as they hoped. This has led to a very small but vocal minority of players saying they will boycott 16 due to it not having black characters. Although if they kept this same mentality, that means they'd only really play 7 or 13, because the rest of the numbered games are pretty devoid of black representation, which I personally don't think is a problem since Final Fantasy characters are more so meant to be Asian anyway, because the game is made by Asian people. I know, crazy, but like I said, nuance is dead these days. Some of these morons went on to say things like, "So despite notable criticism and backlash online regarding the lack of diversity in the game, and Square's continuously questionable response to the topic, it seems a lot of people are still planning to purchase Final Fantasy XVI. This feels a little odd to me because it would seem like the best way to send a message to Square would be to vote with your wallet per se, and not purchase the game given these concerns. I was specifically wondering if anyone was going to take a stand and not purchase or boycott 16 due to these issues. It's not particularly difficult either given just how many games there are to play. It won't move the needle, but it'll make me feel better about my purchases. I'm not buying it, to be completely honest. Knowing that Starfield and Dragon's Dogma are coming with black characters and black character creation make it really easy to skip 16. As you can see, there's a very specific group of terminally online morons who think unless a game bends to their every whim, it should just not exist. What's funny is that this sort of selectiveness when it comes to games and saying you can't enjoy something unless you see yourself in it is at its core a form of internalized racism that unironically seeps out of these poor people. But I can't expect any less these days from people who've been raised by the internet instead of their own parents. And this is where I stop being nice and begin to just go Super Saiyan, because I have a thing or two to say about this. You see, the reason why these people want diversity and representation in games is because they hate anyone who doesn't look like them. But beyond that, these identity politically driven insane nutjobs are almost always all talk and no action. Because think about it, be honest with yourselves, whenever something does bend its every whim from diversity or representation, what usually ends up happening to these sorts of products? They usually always fail. And the reason why these sorts of products fail is because these diversity-obsessed parasites never put their money where their mouths are. They just like the idea of diversity. They like the concept that a black person is in a video game. But they almost never support these games, and that's why they fail, and then they cry foul as if they're suddenly victims now. They say they want black representation in Final Fantasy, yet when Square Enix did bend the knee to those demands, they made Forspoken, which is basically a Final Fantasy-like game on PS5 with flashy explosions and stars a black female protagonist. And like I just said, these woke morons never actually show up to support the things they want to begin with. Since Forspoken flopped so badly for Square and PlayStation that its studio, Luminous Productions, was folded back internally into Square Enix, and the IP of Forspoken and the people behind it are no longer working on that dead franchise. So you say you want diversity, you say you want representation, but the truth is that even when you get what you want, you don't support it anyway. How do you think you're going to influence the industry and the way games go about things if all you do is throw your arms up in the air without ever actually lifting a finger to do anything? Because if you idiots actually stood up for what you believed in, surely Forspoken wouldn't have flopped. But you didn't buy it, did you? Hell, even I bought Forspoken for content purposes mostly. I even platinumed the game, and as someone who experienced everything it had to offer, it was the definition of mid. But I think the other reason why these wokies don't support the ideas they champion is largely because most of these people are jobless, communist nutjobs who have no skills or prospects. One of the real pandemics of this world is the amount of young people who've drank the Kool-Aid, thinking society should embrace communism and nobody should work and we would all be happy with the bare minimum. These dumbasses truly think if they lived in a communist society, they could just lounge around at home all day and play video games. When in reality, they'd be working a job for 16 hours a day being paid scraps as they starve to death while the upper 1% of people have everything. You insufferable, pathetic wastes of space have so little personal drive to better yourselves that you'd rather burn down everything you don't agree with instead of actually pushing yourselves to see the change you want in the world. Because real change is done by those who work their asses off and actually take risks, instead of sitting at home talking to their they-them communist friends on forums while complaining there isn't a black character in a game made by Japanese people. Hell, I know for a fact the majority of these idiots wouldn't even buy 16 even if the entire cast was black and non-binary, because they never support anything. They just pirate their music and illegally download all their entertainment because they can't fathom supporting capitalistic ideas. Then they bitch and moan when the things they like get cancelled because nobody is buying them. They truly do think the world runs on thoughts and prayers instead of money and gasoline. Look at games like Saints Row. They bent it over backwards for you guys and none of you bought it and it failed. What about movies like Strange World, which has an openly gay main character? Why didn't you go to the theaters to watch that? Why was Strange World one of Disney's biggest flops of all time? Where were you guys to support that movie when it needed you? And even very recently, you had Elemental come out from Pixar, which had a non-binary water person character, and that movie is now the biggest flop in Disney Pixar history. Why didn't you go see that? Because your work ethic and your opinions are about as fluid as the genders you identify as. That's why. None of you woke idiots have even a modicum of work ethic to actually shape the world into the utopia you so desperately desire. Then there's people like me, whose dad died of alcoholism, and I worked my ass off to support my mom and pay for all my bills along with my father's and the house all by myself, and my hard work and suffering led to a better life where I am now in a much better position. You couldn't even fathom the idea of actually trying in this world, because the concepts you digest on a daily basis have made you complacent, compliant, and worthless. If you actually gave a shit about the things you preached about, you'd really put yourself out there and try to change things. But all you woke morons do is demand change, and when change happens, you complain that it isn't enough, and then you wonder why most ordinary people can't stand you guys. Seriously, Final Fantasy XVI could have a lesbian Indian woman with a half-shaved haircut riding a non-binary chocobo with a white straight male villain, and all you idiots would do is send out a few tweets going, "My representation," and then you'd forget about it 20 minutes later. only to respond to the failure of said product and say, why didn't anyone buy this? Knowing full well you didn't buy it either.
You're fucking stupid.
God, I hate this generation so much, dude. I can't believe that the world today and the people within it have it so easy that they really feel the need to create fake problems in order to feel oppressed. While you're wearing your Doc Marten boots with your septum piercing in your nose, wearing a Che Guevara shirt, which is hella ironic by the way, since Che would despise you people and think you're somehow morally right in all of this. I'm convinced the reason why the woke movement has spawned so many of these insufferable NPC-like nobodies is because most of you have been taught it's better to lie on your back and cry than actually try for once and make something out of yourself. I know this video kinda just went full-blown rant, but that's what this stupid article made me feel. You people don't even know what you want anyway. The entire world could bend to your whims and yet still find ways to criticize and cry about it. I'm just waiting for the supposed remake of Final Fantasy IX to get announced and for these same morons to bitch and moan about that too. Maybe they'll even accuse Square Enix of racism and say characters like Vivi promote blackface somehow. It's no wonder that the games that do the best for the most part are largely just rejecting these ideas. Diablo 4, which has its own problems, at the very least just told its story without talking down to the audience. None of the characters that I encountered in that game's story anyway felt forced or diversity checklisted, they just felt like people, and that's all you need. You don't need to checklist off every stupid moronic gender and identity in every piece of media in order to make sure you don't offend anybody. Because as we've seen so many times in the past, even when you do pander, the woke cult are always mere seconds away from devouring their own if they step out of line. And when these products that do push diversity end up failing, they always say it's cause the customers are racist. Instead of realizing that nobody wants to buy your product or watch your dumb show if all you do is push diversity, diversity, diversity every waking freaking moment of the day.
Vast accessibility for every single person in the world to be able to stare at a screen and see a version of themselves staring right back at them.
We get it. Other people exist. Stop homogenizing everything into a gray paste when it comes to entertainment. You can't expect people to be accepting of your ideas when the only way you enforce those ideas is by invoking them through fear instead of actual acceptance. I am so sick of these idiots, and it's why I push back so hard always. This culture war will not stop until we change things for the better or give up and allow the rainbow tsunami to consume everything we know and love. And when they say Final Fantasy doesn't have diversity, please, what about Barrett Wallace, or Kyros, or Fran? Saz? I hate it here. And you know why I know this game will be special? I'll just let Asmongold explain it. Here, watch.
Like, all right, so this is like my perspective being completely objective. I think any other year, Tears of the Kingdom or Diablo 4 would take it. But the difference, I think, besides last year, because last year was Elden Ring, right? But besides that, Tears of the Kingdom is basically Breath of the Wild, and Diablo 4 is basically Lost Ark plus Diablo 3. Neither of these games are tremendously innovative in a level that a action combat Final Fantasy game for the first time in the 30 years of the history of a series, one of the oldest video game series of all time, completely changing the way that it's done, having cutting edge graphics, cutting edge combat, cutting edge storytelling, the entire fucking thing, like just based off of the context of what Final Fantasy is as a game and what it represents, is so much more than Tears of the Kingdom or Diablo 4. So I think that in terms of game of the year, I think Final Fantasy takes it for sure. That's what I think.
Final Fantasy XVI is a medieval Euro fantasy action RPG that's made by a passionate group of Japanese developers. And how dare any of these so-called Final Fantasy fans have the audacity to demand or threaten to boycott these things because the person on the cover of the game doesn't look like you? How pathetic and self-loathing do you people need to become before you realize that the biggest threat to your way of life and your beliefs are the very people that support it? This is why your woke culture is being thrown back in your face, because nobody with a functioning brain and an inkling of knowledge about history knows that everything you dumbasses stand for is complete and utter lunacy built upon a hill of garbage. Final Fantasy XVI will be a massive hit and good for them. It is more than the skin colors of the characters in the game, it is more than the diversity checklists, and it will be something special. You want your ugly, believable characters in a woke Western game? I guess you can be excited for that new Fable game then. But for the actual paying customers out there who work for a living and have real problems, I'm glad we have something to enjoy like Final Fantasy that seems to have some really great and well-designed characters to look forward to. In the end, my friends, these sorts of boycotts by liberal, communist, brain-rotted idiots will never have any hold on the modern world because these dummies don't even participate in the same world as you and I. They are lazy, insufferable nutjobs who want everything handed to them for free and want an award for simply existing. As for the rest of us, the people who actually have plans to do something with our lives, I hope you enjoy Final Fantasy XVI. And know that while you play it, that the game rejects every modern woke trope and nonsensical checklisting idea, and instead gives you a mature dark story with real characters and amazing gameplay. Imagine that, a real video game for once. Final Fantasy XVI does not need diversity because the people who want that are not real fans to begin with. Thank you for watching, subscribe for more, like the video to help the channel out, have a great day, and if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go play Final Fantasy XVI now and have the time of my life. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.